Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Time Blog. Thanks for tuning in today. My name is Trilby Lawless, and I'm very happy to have joining me here our very own CEO at Big Time, Brian Saunders.
Hey,
He
Trilly.
agreed to sit down with me today and let me pick his brain on the year we've had in 2020 and what's to come. So, Brian, thanks for joining me on video chat. I'm excited to hear all your answers.
Cool, me too. I can't wait to hear what I say.
Perfect start. So
Yeah,
I
great.
want to go ahead and dive right in because we have a lot of good stuff to cover and start with looking at 2020 as a year in review. So what this year has really taught you about business. Obviously, no one saw this year coming. How do you think that impacted you as a leader?
As a leader, well, you're right. Nobody saw it coming, right? And it's funny because this is my third recession, right? So right, the first one we were right in the middle of it. It hit the tech industry in 2000 when I was in the tech industry, and it just felt like your whole world exploded. And it was, I remember at that time I was much younger, and I remember the time seeing people in other industries that were kind of tangentially affected, and they looked at it kind of more as a spectator sport, and thinking at the time, oh my God, like the entire world's imploding and nobody knows. And it was kind of my first experience with it. And I was fortunate that at the time in Chicago, we have a decent tech community. So there were people who had been through recessions before, not anything like that, but recessions, who were great people to pick their brain. Like I could sit down at lunch and just talk about how to think about like trimming and how to think about revenue and planning. And that was super helpful for me. And then in 2008, we were already kind of in the throes of building this solution, this SaaS solution that is Big Time when the economic recession hit the real estate industry. And we do a ton of work with architects and engineers. We don't do hard hats, but we do a lot of architects and engineers, and they were really profoundly affected by 2008. But we were like a ridgeline removed. So we deal with a lot of professional services firms, and at that stage, that was some small portion of the work we do, maybe 30% or so. But it affected us. It kind of forced us to pause growth, but it didn't really kind of dig into the staff at the time in '08. And that's when I kind of figured out, okay, if you're a couple of ridge lines removed from the core, the epicenter of the recession, you're insulated to some extent, right? Depending on how long it lasts. And so then when this hit, this was kind of, I thought, okay, this is the whole reason I'm a manager, right? This is all your training. You spend all this time like trying to figure out how to manage a firm, not to manage the good times, because anybody can manage good times, right? It's the difficult times where you really push your training to the test. And there's some in this case, your personal leaks into the professional in this case, right? Everybody goes home. And it's not just that there's a recession, it's also that people are worried about their family getting sick. And geez, you think back to March and April, we didn't know if kids could really, get seriously ill and die from this. We weren't sure what the rate would be. There was all this kind of political back and forth about whether people really are dying. So whatever side of the political spectrum you were on in March and April, you're thinking, oh man, somebody is hiding something. Like personally, it's
Yeah.
super stressful. And so my 19-year-old son got COVID at college. We were worried about that. Uh, we had customers applying for PPP all over, so we were worried about that. So just it was a real test. And I think where we came out of it is early, kind of in the crisis after we all went remote, we kind of
Mhm.
sat down as a team and said, all right, well, our goal as a company, if we're not going to be blown up by this recession and pandemic, then we should kind of try to be a port in the storm. That's really kind of where we focused our attention. I think that led to a lot of the activity that we took, both internally, port in the storm for our staff, obviously, but also, how can we be that same thing for our clients during that same time frame?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to point out that we had a little bit of a different experience as a SaaS company versus professional services firms. And when I was looking at what other leaders and CEOs were saying about this topic, many people brought up, cash flow became more
Yep.
important than ever. Your relationships really mattered. your transparency with employees was huge, and being able to have that market diversity was really key.
Yeah.
Which one of those resonates the most with you, or do you think you have anything to add that was missed?
Yeah, right. All of them first. It's funny because each of those were conversations I had with customers. We just had literally hundreds of calls with customers who, some of them to, ask what we were doing, and some of them are just kind of, this is kind of what burst that whole concept of being a port in the storm, right? Like a lot of
Mhm.
them just need more information. Like I'm a great engineer, I'm a great architect, but I talked to one person who the city of or the state of California just shut down all permits that weren't essential. So I said, wait, why are you guys focused? It's surveying. You're out in the middle of nowhere. You're not anywhere close to people. And he said, yeah, more work than I know what to do with, but I can't pull any permits. So I can't physically do the work. So what you learn from that is people are just craving connection and information. So we figured out, as I said pretty quickly, that it probably wouldn't affect our client base as much as other industries. We're not in travel, we're not in leisure, we're not in restaurant. We're not in event planning. And so for our customers, they are also a few ridge lines removed. And, we did some surveys early on to try and figure that out. But the breaking point, or the tipping point for us to figure out what we might be able to do is the publishing that survey. Suddenly people were like, yeah, when are you going to do the next one? Because they just crave information about what other companies are up to. So for us, our tactics changed, but our plan internally was the same. And now that we kind of establish, all right, well, we're not going to have to cut many people. We're not going to have to cut heads. But I think we can continue to grow at a decent clip, and we did grow at a decent clip. We had a lot of people who Big Time was their remote management tool, right? You're the one who's helping me transfer it from one person's desk to another, because we don't have desks anymore. We're all at home. And so now that kind of led us to say, all right, well, now that we have a safe port, what's everybody else worrying about, right? And so we kind of proved out the theory that being a great place to work has nothing to do with office space and coffee bars and ping pong tables. It has to do with how much can I rely on the rest of my organization. And so all of those play a piece in of it, but I think mostly it's kind of being close to your customers. And on the other side, the customers aren't your only constituents. Getting close to your staff as well, to figure out, all right, how do we weather this together, was kind of a big part of the people who were successful in 2020. And I mean, the number of CEO conversations I've had, just because we service a lot of those guys, looking for ways to get closer, and that aha moment where they're like, oh yeah, okay, so like we're neighbors in this. How can we promote community, I guess. And so pushing that in 2020, I think, was a big part of our internal corporate strategy, less than like the dry stuff that goes on, cash flow and double checking with staff and reporting, et cetera. I think it's more about, if you didn't have community, you really struggled this year.
I agree. And flipping to the opposite side of that, is there something you've had on your never do this in business list before that now you've changed your mind on from this year?
You hate to turn a podcast into a sermon, right? But it was very difficult to deal with March and April and May. People were uncertain, and I was so our team stepped up, as you're kind of in it. I mean, just the breakout sessions on Slack where you can take a break and hang out with other people. Like, we have a channel there for the parents, because what we figured out was, working at home is one thing. Working at home with, 2 kids trying to do remote learning is something entirely different. So we gave outlet, and just a little bit of community lets you figure out, oh, I'm not crazy. Other people are experiencing the same thing. You saw it explode on LinkedIn too. Like, people, like, is anyone else going nuts having their 7-year-old at home? So a lot of sharing that helped people feel like they weren't crazy. The part of the problem with a situation like this, it's so nuts, is that it's crazy making. you think you're insane, right? And
Yeah.
so you can rely on community to say, yeah, okay, so I'm not nuts. People really are have a situation where they may not have to lay off as many people, and here's how people are actually rationally thinking through right sizing the business through this period of time. So we did a lot of kind of outbound for surveys, and we did that whole PPP series of webinars to help our customers apply and understand how to apply, that type of thing, which was fine. I'm getting to your question, I swear. But in June, everything changed, right? In June, the whole prohibition against talking about politics in the office right out the window, because suddenly you have protests all over the country, and like the city of Chicago blowing up.
Hmm.
So, I mean, like internally, that was tough. Don't you think? I mean, we spent a lot of time on that, like just trying to figure out, all right, well, as a, how would you say it? As a company, how do we come together? So I
Well,
thought,
I admired a lot about what initiative you took and other leaders, that it felt like a safe space to explore that together and talk about it together. That's what I found really valuable, because I think a lot of us were lost. I even know with something as trivial as what do we post on social media this week? I'd never, dealt with that
as a,
before, and being able
as a
to
context, right?
lean
Yeah,
on each other to figure that out was important to
sure.
me.
Right. And add to that it's, listen, I've never talked to anybody on either side of the spectrum. We're in a blue state and a red county is where I live, right? We're in business, so there's a natural tendency for everyone to be a little bit more what people would traditionally call conservative, but we're also, a young company where many of the people in the organization are what you would traditionally call liberal. So there's this clash, for how do we address the problem, let alone like how do we acknowledge the problem. And I just, I thought that it kind of leads to the stuff that ultimately, again, back to community and being a safe port. Like, if we can build that foundation, both for customers and in this case, for staff, the world is blowing up and customers are already need a community. And now suddenly internally, the staff is blowing up and they all need community as well. And so building that foundation all remote, it is a really tough thing to navigate. And I thought I was really proud of what the company did, but ultimately, I've sat in on calls. I've sat in on calls with other CEOs, in forums, and heard guys my age look a lot like me say, well, I thought business was a place where we didn't talk about politics, and hearing that and realizing, oh yeah, well there you go, there's the problem. That's business is a place where we don't talk about politics. And as soon as we threw that out the window, which before 2020, I would never do that. It's crazy. It's suicidal. But the organization kind of got behind it, not just us, in the leadership team, but everyone in the organization got behind it. And I think it led to really positive movement internally. We all kind of figured out, all right, here's how we're collectively going to navigate it. Here's what we believe collectively, is kind of our best move. And it worked for big time, and it worked for Chicago. It's
Yeah.
funny, we don't have, it's a big damn country. Like the vast majority of the people there aren't that many giant cities, right? Like Chicago's unusual. And it maybe you get a couple of dozen big cities that have these problems where people are living so close together, and it's just so diverse that the rules are a little different, right? And so you can kind of get now with 2020 hindsight why there's a giant swath of the country that's like, what the hell is going on in Chicago? Meanwhile here we're like, well, yeah, of course, we're living on top of each other and everybody's isolated, and there's these big systemic problems that we have to deal with. And so there's a little bit of big city dirty laundry that got aired, and that required us to break some of these rules that maybe you wouldn't have to break if your office is in the middle of some a little bit quieter suburb in the middle of Ohio or whatever. So it was an unusual moment for us, but I think ultimately the situation dictated that we get rid of that prohibition and actually address it head on. And I think that's probably true with most of the firms in especially technology firms in the country. Some went overboard, a little bit too, maybe preachy. You have to walk a mile in another man's shoes before you suggest, take a different path, but ultimately, I think, we ended up at the right spot for our constituency, our community, and I think it's really paid off.
Yeah, I think that was a highlight for me this year, at least with the social unrest and with COVID. You really saw how bringing a little bit of your personal life into work isn't always such a bad thing, and sometimes can help even make your work better if you can lean on the people you work with. But besides that, what
Yeah.
was another positive that came out of this year for you? Where do you think big time or just in general we changed for the better because of all of this?
Yeah, I think it's related to that. I think it was a hothouse year, I think what came out of the decision to have everybody let their guard down and really lay those politics bare internally uh, didn't just lead to change. We did diversity training in the middle of I remember talking to other CEOs about that, and the reaction was like, "This is the weirdest time for you to do it. Like, I don't understand what you're like. The timing on it could not be worse. Nobody's thinking about that right now." I mean, actually taking days off to have the whole company go through it and share stories. But I think ultimately, and you're a better judge than I am, but I love the fact that everybody in the firm showed up as their best self. I think I'm proudest maybe of like, just think of Slack. Everybody shows up with, humor and personality and authenticity, and it just makes you feel like you're okay. I get it. Like these people are here in it with me. That's part of the definition of being a port in the storm, is acknowledging the storm that's blowing like crazy, and feeling like you're in it with other people. And that's true for 2020. Community becomes hugely important, not just internally for your staff, but also, for your clients. I was super proud of the fact that your team put together all those webinars on PPP, because we just got slammed with calls of people trying to figure out what other folks are doing. And I thought those were so illuminating, and well received among the client base, but also like, hey, this is hard. It's hard for everybody, by the way. It's not just hard for us. It's hard for the banks to figure out. It's hard for the government to figure out. It's a big problem to lift. And so the fact that we could recognize that in the big time community and help them address it, and then the social unrest internally, recognize the pain in our own family.
Mm-hmm. Well, and speaking of relying on an external community, a lot of companies had to pivot this year. Was there a company in particular that inspired you?
Yeah, right. I don't know. I mean, it's the everyday that's really tricky with the customers and with the clients that are kind of out there working to resolve this. I think that I'm always shocked at the ingenuity of entrepreneurs, and I am one. I've worked with this same set of kind of entrepreneurial business leaders, these professional services leaders for decades, and it still surprises me to see how resilient they are in these types of situations. So I don't know that I have somebody in particular, by like the number of conversations I've had where we're kind of digging through projections with customers and reformatting kind of how they're dealing with budgeting, and kind of understanding, all right, so if we fit things together this way, it changes up the company. I thought that just watching that entrepreneur go to work in a situation like this, you always hear about it, you always talk about it news-wise, and even in marketing sites, you talk about the kind of the strength of the entrepreneur, but watching them go to work, watching them tackle this problem has been super inspiring. It kind of helps you understand like the secret sauce that exists in the economy at large, is that tendency to roll up your sleeves and get to work, and seeing our customers do that thousands and thousands of times this year was really inspiring for me personally, as opposed to one specific,
Mm-hmm.
instance.
Switching gears a little bit now, looking towards the future instead of continuing to live in 2020, which I think we'll all be glad to say goodbye to. And I do have to poke fun of you a little bit here, because I know last year I was bugging you about doing a predictions blog for 2020, and we never got to it. And now I think that was probably perfect foreshadowing for the year ahead, because I'm sure would not want to go back and read what we wrote predicting. But looking ahead at 2021, what do you think is in store for the professional services industry? Do you have any predictions about the next year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think people will be shocked. I said this back in March too, so you can take it with a grain of salt. But I think people will be shocked at the pace at which PS bounces back from the pandemic. I think I don't know larger economy because that's bigger than my brain can kind of wrap itself around. But just in terms of this little industry, I think it's poised for a significant kind of uptick in 2021. And what does that mean? Well, okay, look, if you've gone to work at community internally, meaning with your staff, and you've gone to work at kind of building community with your customers, now is the time to start to think about what that growth looks like, because it will come back quickly. And unfortunately, it'll come back with some urgency, right? Like the stuff that our customers do, architects and engineers, IT services, security consultants, management consulting, even accounting, that those are not things that are optional. Those are things that we put off because we had to. And so as those projects come back, they're going to come back with a ferocity that I think will shock a lot of people. And so from a pure professional services perspective, obviously, my guess would be we'll continue to work from home substantially through most of 2020 or 2021, excuse me. But I don't think that will slow down how quickly customers come back, new projects come back, and the requirement to hire new people comes back. So, I think generally speaking, if you're not preparing for that today, you want to get on it. You don't want to be too late. What'll happen is all those projects that were on pause in 2020 will come back with a vengeance, and if you have kind of hunkered down and can't quite deal with them, those will go somewhere else. And so it's tricky because you're trying to capture roughly a year and a half worth of growth in 12 months, and if you're not prepared to do that, you don't have the systems in place to make that happen. You don't have the kind of predictive capabilities and an understanding of how to systematize and productize the service offering that you put in place. It'll be a tough year to keep up. You'll lose a lot of opportunity. I think people will grow, they just won't grow as quickly as they could, and we have some time to make up.
Yeah, and with 2021 being a comeback year, I know we have a lot of big things up our sleeves. Can you give a teaser of what's in store for big time to come in the next year?
Yeah, great. It's funny because I think the community thing that we talked about at the top of the call and maybe throughout internally was really a turning point for us. I think we kind of realized, hey, our responsibility isn't just to help people manage projects and manage time and manage staff, think more about their firm as a firm and less a collection of projects. It's really to help get the resources in front of them that help them grow. And so the more we can be involved in that, the more we can make those resources available, both in the system and also externally, the better. So, we've got some focus groups coming up to talk about the products, and we'll have invites going out to customers and get involved in that. We've set up an advisory board that our head of product, who we hired this year, is running. That should kick off in 2020. Part of remote work and remote management is mobile, obviously, and so we're not happy with our mobile platform today. We want to create a new UX for it. We want to incorporate some more of that kind of management tool capability within the mobile app and try and push more activity in the mobile if we can. We have a new UX coming for the product that many people have already seen, so we'll see that as well. We'll get more into document management. We'll get more into skills management, and really just helping people figure out how to take that collection of projects and turn it into something that feels more like a firm. And so, we've got a lot of stuff like that, and then some things that you know about that are kind of outside of the product, just in terms of content that I'm excited about as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to work together on the launch of a few podcasts next year, which is exciting. One with Engineering Management Institute and one on our own. So can you just talk a little bit about what those will cover and what to tune in for?
Yeah, and that's kind of the beginning. So the theme behind that, and then we kind of went out and scoured the universe of folks who are doing this kind of work to say, how can we bring this content to our customer base? But one of them, the first one you mentioned, EMI, Andrew is running that, and we're sponsoring it, and it's a conversation about how to grow your engineering firm. And Andrew's been working mostly in civil engineering, but elsewhere as well, in helping people think about the management aspect of an engineering firm. And anything from staff to reviews to how to grow, to who to hire, what to look for, how to be more entrepreneurial. What if you want to launch your own firm? Andrew talks a lot about all of that. But this, we sat down with him and said, look, we have a lot of engineering firms that are in that kind of 30 to 60 person, and they're looking to grow, and they just need to systematize and professionalize. And Andrew said, great, we'll get together the stories and talk about people who have been there, done that. It's a pattern, just like anything else. It's exactly what private equity firms bring to software companies like me. Like, we've seen this movie before, so let's go over what the script looks like, and you'll hear from real people, and Andrew will lead the discussion. That's the EMI podcast that should kick off in the first quarter. The second one I'm looking forward to is just kind of hero stories from our customer base. Same theme, right? But a little broader. We have a group that's working with us to work through customer interviews specifically on how did you manage growth? How did you decide who the next hire is? Who is your next hire? What's your biggest worry? How are you dealing with it? All things that, there may be some discussion of big time as a product, but ultimately content that's meant to allow our customers to see how other firms, other CEOs think about growth and how they're achieving it, just to see what applies to you. It's helpful to get out from underneath, kind of remember what it's like to run a firm that's based on projects, and you just get so sucked up into the projects that you need some time to get out from underneath it and think big about where you want the organization to go. I want to build a company I'm proud of, right? And so we have a series of interviews that are designed to help you think about just that. We'll do more. We'll have people come in and talk about how to market professional services firms, how to sell professional services firms, what contracts look like. All of that you should look for on the blog. We'll start to fill it up with things that I think will really help folks who are in that growth mode in PS really, shift into growth mode in 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, and hope that some of our viewers, even watching today, can join the conversation and be a part of it and create that community like we've said all along. So
it'd be great. Listen, everybody kind of came together to help. We didn't have customers who, with a small number, we didn't have many customers who went out of business, and a lot of that is support, helping me with PPP, figuring out how to adjust contracts with people who called us and said, listen, I can't do my renewal this month, but I can in 3 months. And being able to accommodate that in 2020 was a big piece of what it means to be community. We're leaning on each other. So now let's do the same thing in a less stressful environment and work together to help everybody grow. I think this little industry, professional services, is a big driver of economic prosperity within the country and kind of worldwide. So the more we can do to help people think about how to make it more successful, I think the better it is for all of us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for talking with me today and going through all these questions. And like we said, I hope we can continue the conversation throughout the year. And before we sign off here, I just want to remind you all, if you could please subscribe to our blog. That's where you can stay up to date when we have new content like this, product releases, and of course the launch of the podcast. And we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Trilby.